All right, all right. So we are here at the first module, deconstructing Sarah. Let's get into it. So, a little bit about Sarah. 18. All right, all right. So, we are at the very first module, deconstructing Sarah. Let's hop into this, see what makes Sarah tick, and figure out how we can help her. So, about Sarah. She's 19 years old, a sophomore college student, procrastinates frequently, like most college students do. Wants to have more time to balance studying, socializing with friends, and working her part time job. She wants to graduate with honors, and her goal is to secure an internship for graphic design. Her dream career is Animators and Company, a world renowned animating agency. Cool. So we got a little bit about Sarah. Sophomore college student. She wants to balance the essentials that pretty much every college student, every student in general, and basically every human by extension wants to balance studying, or let's say if you're an adult, working, socializing with friends, and working her part time job. Now, let's take a look at her current schedule. And I think this is going to be the point where I start to kind of really give my 2 cents. And I'm probably going to interject here and there and just give some ideas about what I would change or what I would fix. But first things first, in the morning, she has a kind of varied wake up time, usually around 8 a.m. Now, the first thing I'm going to recommend off the bat, and this is something I always recommend to everybody, clients, if you watch any of my other videos, I always recommend this. Set a definitive wake up time and a definitive bedtime. Even if you don't always manage to wake up at a specific time, or if you don't always manage to go to bed at a specific time, setting that wake up time by itself will help you. What it does is it creates a little bit of urgency throughout your day. So it prevents, or I shouldn't say prevents it, but it helps minimize the potential of procrastination. For example, if you wake up and say your wake up time is at 6 a.m. Before you go to bed, you already have an idea of when you're supposed to be up. And you can sort of calculate internally how many hours of sleep you need, what time you should go to bed based on your own sleep cycle. And it creates a little bit of pressure to actually go to bed on time so you can wake up at a regular time. Now, the same applies to going to bed at a certain time. You need to sort of set what's a good way to put this? You need to sort of set a time to go to bed so that way the entire day you're creating urgency and you're not taking too much time to do things. If you know your bedtime is at 10 p.m. and it's currently 5 p.m., you know how much you can squeeze in with relatively speaking. You know how much you can squeeze in until that 10 p.m. mark hits. So this is why it's important to set a wake up time and a definitive bedtime. She wakes up at different times depending on her class schedule and her work shift. So, like I said, this all kind of gets fixed when you set a definitive wake up time and a definitive bedtime. And it might need adjustment and you might need to experiment with different times based on your work schedule, or some days of the week you might want to have a later bedtime than others. But in general, I would recommend having a definitive and consistent wake up time and bedtime. Often skips breakfast or grabs a quick, unhealthy snack on the way to class. And this is something that can be fixed once you create a certain wake up time. If you find that your first class, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but if, for example, she were to find her first class is at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and she struggles to get breakfast and she wants breakfast, it might be because she wakes up at 8 a.m. So instead of waking up at 8 a.m., she should wake up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and give herself enough time to make food. Or on the other hand, she could also schedule time throughout her day to make a meal the day before, for example. So that way she doesn't have to worry about waking up and just kind of grabbing whatever's available. She already has a meal prepared. Her typical class schedule is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Class is from 9 to 10 and 2 to 6 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And class is from 10 to 12 and 2 to 3 on Tuesday and Thursday. All right, so pretty fairly typical schedule. She typically works part-time at Starbucks from 4 to 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays and 10 to 3 p.m. on Saturdays. So this is good. She gets a little bit of flexibility kind of throughout the week when it comes to her work schedule. She's not working every single day, which is good. It gives her some free time um, on all of those days outside of Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then Saturdays too, she's kind of, this is as a quick side note, this is a good and bad thing. I know a lot of college students hate, and this was true for myself at least. I hated early shifts on a weekend, and I would consider 10 a.m. a early shift. It's not super early, and I think if you're in the work world, it certainly is not an early shift. But 10 a.m. for a college student, I think, is a bit early when you probably want to sleep in for the most part on Saturday, or maybe you were out late the night before doing whatever you might be doing. Um, 10 a.m. is a bit early, but the good thing about an early work shift is that work kind of forces you to get up. Like, it's easier to be accountable to someone else or something else, if that makes sense. So work forces you to get up early, and it kind of forces you to kind of get your day started. Where on the other hand, if you kind of relied on yourself to wake up at 10 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., you could easily lie to yourself or fool yourself or give yourself some out to sleep in. So at the very least, she's starting off her day somewhat productive. She's working, she's at least making money and doing something on Saturday when she might otherwise be sleeping in. Let's see. She misses some breaks or arrives to work and class late due to catching up with friends or scrolling through social media. All right. So sometimes basically it seems like she just works or I'm sorry, it seems like sometimes she just kind of scrolls through social media, kind of gets locked in that endless scrolling and loses track of time. And because of this, she gets to a class late or arrives to work late, which I'm sure we've all been through at some point. And you might still be in that situation right now. But let's continue. She attends a graphic design club twice a month that meets Thursdays from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. She struggles to study and often procrastinates, leading to fatigue and overwhelm as work begins to pile up. I think this is a very super normal thing that happens with a lot of people. I think tons of college students often kind of procrastinate. I think that's one of the main things college students do a lot is they procrastinate. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm not going to get super deep into it yet, but that procrastination does need to be handled as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible because it tends to lead to this fatigue and this overwhelm as the work begins to pile up or as you start to get close to your deadlines. She often crams before tests or pulls all-nighters when projects are due. No main issues with her job at Starbucks, although her shifts can fluctuate. Sometimes she's asked to work more shifts or unusual hours. All right, that's not too unreasonable. That's pretty normal, I would say. Sometimes she's not needed during her standard shifts. Now, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is good and bad. It's bad because not being needed during standard shifts means that it can kind of throw off your schedule and it could lead to less money. And if she's someone that needs to get X amount of shifts per week to pay her rent or eat food or whatever, then that could be a bit problematic. And that's one of those things where you have to kind of maybe have a discussion with your boss and maybe try to get some more hours or cover people's shifts more frequently if there are people that take off from work often. And in some situations, you might just have to find a new job. But based on what we have, it doesn't seem like she's pressed for money. So this could be a good thing. And the good thing about this is that it frees up extra time to make up for maybe her not getting certain things done in other areas quickly enough. And we'll get into that soon. But I do think that's a blessing and a curse, kind of all the same. She wants to make time to look for internships. Her bedtime usually varies, but she often stays up late to socialize, scroll through social media, or binge watch Netflix. We've all been there, and sometimes we are still there. Often feels tired even after waking up in the morning. And I feel like what this is, that last part, feels tired after waking up, is just from going to bed super late and trying to force yourself to wake up early at a certain time without kind of getting a full good night's rest, a quality rest. So now I'm going to kind of go through just a few different steps that she can take initially to solve some of the core problems. And we're going to repeat this process a few different times. But first of all, the first thing she should do is, and I recommend this to everybody all the time, no matter what, is get a planner. I tend to find that most people do not have planners in their own lives. Most people, I think, kind of wing the day. And I think if you wing the day, you don't really get much done. I truly think in order to be effective, you have to have a planner. You have to have some idea of what you're doing at every specific hour of the day. So usually, and of course, what I recommend if you don't have a planner, I have a free one. Go download it, or you can just use your calendar app on your phone. If you have Google Calendars is fantastic. I use that all the time. Um, if you want to go out and buy a physical planner, there's some at the dollar store that are super cheap. They're not big, usually the ones I've seen, but they work quite well. I've seen some more fancier ones. Some of them range for about $5, $10, $30. I've seen some for about $80. Depends on what you want. There's no right or wrong planner to use, but my recommendation is to get a planner. The next thing I would do is make a list of all the consistent activities that she has. So this would be her class schedule, her work shifts, and her graphic design club that meets twice a month. I would put all of that in a planner. And on the next page, I'm going to show you an example of what her planner would look like. But in real life, if you're kind of using like a bulky planner that has multiple days lined out, I would recommend she just fill out each of those days beforehand. So, for example, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday should look like this. If it repeats, it every single day of every single week of that month should look the same based on whatever she has scheduled for that day. Hopefully that makes sense. So I would put that in the planner, and I would actually put that in the planner. I've had some clients and I've seen some people where they try to memorize things and they don't want to put it in the planner. And the reason is because they think they know in their head what their schedule is. And while that may be true, I tend to find that if you put it physically in the planner, it allows you to visually see how much time you have and how much time you don't have. And it allows you to kind of maneuver things around in order to accomplish your goals more effectively. And then finally, I kind of mentioned this already, but put all of those things in the planner. Again, it's just to kind of visualize your day more effectively. So this is an example. If assuming we just do those few things that I just mentioned, this is a general idea of what her schedule or her planner should look like. You can kind of see we have the wake up times right at the top. And in this situation, I'm just suggesting that she wakes up at 8 a.m. That should give her enough time to wake up, get ready. If she wants to, some people like me fast in the morning. If she wants to fast, she's totally okay to do that. If she needs more time to get breakfast, she can always adjust her schedule and wake up at 7 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. So this is just an example of what she could do just to begin. And then you can see all of her classes are already placed in her calendar. Um, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They look slightly different. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are all the same. And Tuesday and Thursday, for the most part, are the exact same, with the exception of, if you can see at the kind of bottom right, she has her graphic design club twice a month. And she also has Starbucks that she works at on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But as you can see, this schedule right here, putting in the planner and making it look like this, makes it easier to see where the gaps are in her day and where she can sort of work on some of her different goals or projects, or if she has homework, things like that. One thing as a side note that I want to bring up, on Thursdays, she works at Starbucks, but every other week she also has graphic design club. Now, in general, I think that might sound like a problem, and it could be a problem for some people because eventually there's going to be some overlap. What I would personally recommend that she does is just simply communicate to her boss that she has graphic design club and that she might need to leave early or just readjust her shift and work a little bit less. Does that make sense? And again, that's a simple conversation to have. Most bosses, especially at a place like Starbucks, in my personal experience, will be 1000% okay with this. I would say, unless it's something like super urgent, which I cannot imagine that Starbucks urgently needs to have one person at a certain time for 10 minutes. I know Starbucks gets super busy. I totally understand that. But I think if you have a conversation beforehand, the manager or whoever designs the shifts at that Starbucks can certainly sit there and say, okay, every other week she's busy with club, at a club. It's for school. They'll understand and they can kind of work with her. All right. So the next thing, we've put in those kind of core things into her planner. Now, here are the next things. Usually, what I recommend people do is all the goals that you want to accomplish, make a big list of them, all of them, or at least the main ones. If you have like 10 main goals that you want to accomplish, just list them all indiscriminately. Just list them. So in her situation, these are things like her internship that she wants to kind of secure, studying in general, because one of her goals is to have a high GPA and get honors. Socializing, that is a goal. Some people need to socialize. Well, everyone needs to socialize, but for some people more than others, socializing is something that they really want to do, but struggle to do without feeling guilt. So I would absolutely put socializing as a goal that she has. Practicing graphic design is also a goal I would recommend she put on her list because she wants to increase her skills so that way when she goes to work for her dream career, she's prepared. From that point, I would reverse engineer the steps to make that goal happen. I think this part tends to be a little bit difficult for people, and I completely understand why. Because depending on the goal, it's difficult to know where to go. Does that make sense? Like, for example, if your goal, and I always use this example, but if your goal is to say, go to the gym, gain weight, and gain some muscle, it might be a little bit difficult if you're not that familiar with working out where to start. You might wonder, do I start with a good routine? Do I start by just going to the gym? Will that make me get injured? Do I start by trying to find some diet plan? You don't know exactly the right steps to take. So, what I would usually recommend is like really sit there and take a lot of time to think of all the ideas that'll help you reverse engineer the steps to your goal. Now, in her situation, this is one of those things, and I also recommend too, if you can't figure out what to do on your own, this is when it's good to kind of consult other people. If you were one of my clients, you'd be talking to me, and I can probably give you some of my 2 cents on what you could do. There's always, and this is going to sound basic, but there's always Google and there's always Chat GPT and AI nowadays. There's always some resource you can use to try to reverse engineer your goals. Hopefully that makes sense. So I would set aside time to reverse engineer the steps to her goals. It doesn't mean she has to be correct, but I think having steps that'll lead to her accomplishing the goal, or at least help her get to the goal, will at least push her in the right direction. And then from that point, throughout the week, I would set aside 1 to 3 hours at least per day to work on each of those goals. Now, I'm not saying that if she has like 10 goals, she needs to set aside 10 to 30 hours per week. But what I am saying is that if she has 10 goals, at least 1 to 3 hours a day should be focused on working on some combination of those 10 goals. So that way, throughout the entire week, she has either worked on all 10 goals, or, and this is what I actually would recommend if she does have, say, 10 goals, I would narrow it down to the top 3 goals, the top 1 to 3 goals, like the 1 to 3 goals that'll really make everything else simpler. And I say this because sometimes people have goals and the goals kind of conflict. Again, this might be me getting ahead of myself, but I think this is really important to understand. Sometimes people have goals that conflict. So I'll give you a quick example. A few years ago, I was trying to build up my real estate business. And in general, I have a lot of goals. I always have a lot of goals. One of my philosophies is to have infinite goals. One of my big goals was to hire this agency to help me with my real estate business. But I also wanted to do martial arts on the side. I literally had just joined kickboxing, like this big kickboxing gym. And I wanted to do kickboxing and jujitsu. I tried doing it, and a combination of my daily schedule that already existed, plus the additional effort to try to build the real estate business, plus trying to dedicate like an hour every other day to kickboxing, plus an additional 30 to 45 minutes every other day to do jujitsu, on top of an hour and a half that I usually go to the gym every single morning, made it pretty much impossible to get everything done. It just wasn't feasible to get all that stuff done. So what I did is I eventually just stopped doing kickboxing and stopped doing jujitsu. And as much as I didn't want to stop doing it, I had to stop doing it because at that point in time, it was virtually impossible for me to effectively do all of those things at once. So the main thing that actually would help me progress was building up the business, because the business equaled money. If you use your money correctly, that equals more time, more freedom, all of that stuff. And with more time and freedom, you can then have the freedom to do kickboxing. So this is kind of just an example of what I mean. Sometimes you can have a lot of goals, but you have to pick the top 1 to 3 goals that are going to drive the most progress in your life. And then once you accomplish those 3 goals, or at least do them so consistently that they become a habit and that they don't require much time and effort to kind of continue building, if that makes sense, then you move on to those other goals. Then you move on to goal 4, goal 5, goal 6, goal 8, goal 10, etc. So in her situation, one of her goals is to find an internship. What I would recommend she do is set a definitive time on her planner every single week, at least 1 to 3 hours per week, to block out time to find an internship. And again, we put all these things on the planner. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right. So as you can see, kind of where the red is, we've added time for her to look up her internships. This guarantees that she's making at least some progress to achieving that goal. And as you can see, too, there's still a lot of gaps throughout the entire week that she can use for whatever she wants to use. And we'll get into those in a minute. We'll try to fill those up. But we have 3 hours total the entire week where she's looking for internships. Now, I actually don't know if I have a slide on this or if I mentioned this or have any notes on this, but the beauty of some goals is that once you accomplish them, they're gone and they free up tons of time for you to do other goals. So you can have an important goal that's mildly urgent, but easily doable. And if you do have a goal like that, I recommend just getting it done as quickly as possible, especially if it's like really impactful and it really matters in the long run. So I'll give you a quick example, and this is going to be maybe a little bit meta. This program that you're watching is a course that I had planned on. It's not, if you're watching this, it is obviously out, but at the time of me filming this, it's not out. My plan is to get it out. And my plan is to get it out because I think it'll help me build more trust with my audience, build more value, give them something where they don't really need to pay anyone else, where they don't need to consume any additional content, kind of all in one package, if that makes sense. This all takes a bit of time, and it's not super time consuming, but just the idea of sitting here, recording the video, making the slides, and I had AI help me with a lot of this, but still making the slideshow, recording the video itself. There's some videos I have to edit slightly. There's some things I have to like tweak a little bit or take a look at and review. It is a bit time consuming. However, in the grand scheme of things, one, I think me having this program will help my business significantly. Two, it's a temporary project. It's not one of those things that I'll have to do forever and forever and forever. Once I get all these videos done, once I get all the content done, it's done. It's done. And then I have a lot of time and a lot of space that I've opened up to different goals of mine that might be maybe more impactful, but not as urgent, or maybe not as impactful and also not as urgent. Does that make sense? So that's just an example. Sometimes there are some goals that you can have that you can put in your planner for an extended period of time, but the goal is to get it done as quickly as possible so that way you can remove it, so that way you can replace it with something else. And in this case, her internship search is one of those things because in the grand scheme of things, she's a sophomore. Let's say, for example, she wants to have an internship secured by summertime. And let's assume it's the beginning of the semester. We don't have that information, but let's assume it's the beginning of the semester in the fall semester. So let's say it's August or September. That gives her about, I'm probably going to be a little bit off, but about 6 months, about 6 or 7 months ish until summer starts, until the summer of the next year starts, to secure an internship. Now, in reality, if she really took 3 hours a week to really put a lot of effort and a lot of focus in and a lot of discipline, she could secure an internship in like a month, maybe less than that, a couple of days. It might be a stretch, but it could happen, is my point. And then if she does, now for the next 6 to 7 months, these 3 hours that she's blocked off for the internship search, they're free and she can do something else instead. So this is kind of why we time block and why we do these things, because we can tackle certain tasks in a certain order of operations. And then once we finish it, we can remove it and open it up for whatever else we want to open it up for. In her case, it might just be socializing. Maybe she wants to just use that time to relax, and that's totally fine. She's allowed to do that because she's accomplished the goal that she set out for herself. All right. So, next step, fill in the remaining gaps with the other priorities and goals that she has. These are things like studying, practicing graphic design, some of the things that are important, but not as urgent. And these are also things that are going to be a little bit more routine. Like practicing graphic design is a bit routine. Studying, routine. You're going to be studying every week as a student for the most part. You're going to be practicing your graphic design, hopefully, every week as a graphic design student for the most part. So she should fill in gaps with those different tasks, those different priorities, those different goals. Now, the next thing is to try to group similar activities together to make them easier to accomplish. For example, and you'll see this in the next slide where I show the new planner, but what I would recommend, and this is something I used to recommend college students do when I had College Conqueror, make a habit of using your breaks in between classes to study and review notes because you're still in that mindset of kind of like that. You're still in that academic mindset. And I tend to find that it's easier to kind of just stay in that academic mindset and just to kind of review a class that you just took or think about topics similar or use the momentum from a class to do projects or to study or to do homework, whatever it is. I feel like it's easier to kind of ride that wave, so to speak, and do a lot of similar tasks than it is to do one task, stop, do a different task, stop, try to do the original task again, stop, try to do a completely different task again, stop. It's more difficult because you have to kind of reset each time and build up momentum for each new but different task. So, like I said, try to do everything that's similar all at once. So, in her situation, what I would just recommend her do is after her class, just if she has time, usually you have about 15 minutes in between classes in general. That tends to be the trend that I've seen. If she has 15 minutes and if it takes her, say, 5 minutes to get to class, maybe take 5 minutes to get to class, take another 5 minutes to just scan her notes. That's it. And believe it or not, and this is kind of like the side tangent, that actually increases retention when you kind of take a quick break and then go back and just kind of scan over your notes or just quickly review. That increases retention. So that's less time in the future that she might have to study. Just kind of a side note. But the point that I want to make is that she should group things together. She shouldn't start one thing and do something completely separate and try to bounce back and forth. That tends to be inefficient, and a lot of people do that. Um, it's so much easier just to kind of do a bunch of similar things together at the exact same time or in consecutive order. And then the final thing, notice all the remaining gaps. And you'll see it on the next slide, but just notice all the remaining gaps that she has. This leaves her plenty of time to do other activities and still enjoy life. And I bring this up, and I'll show the slide actually. I bring this up because one of the most consistent, I guess, criticisms I get about this idea of structuring and planning your day is people say, well, if you structure and plan your day is going to be too rigid and it doesn't offer much time for flexibility. It's going to feel too much like a chore, like a job. I think it's the exact opposite because in reality, you're not going to do every single thing on your planner perfectly every single day. That does not happen. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's close. It's extremely difficult because things just come up. She might have a class, for example, and her class might get canceled, or the teacher might let them out early, or maybe she has a certain place on campus where she uses a computer to do her internship search. And during this time gap, that place is taken for whatever reason. Maybe the computers all blew up. Maybe a swarm of students are just using that computer lab. Maybe her laptop battery just exploded in her backpack or something. Who knows? There's a thousand things that could have happened. But the point that I'm making is that plans always go south often. And that's fine. This is part of life. And there are going to be days too where she just might not feel like doing something on this list. Believe it or not, college students skip classes. There's a day where she might just want to skip one of those morning classes or maybe one of those afternoon classes. It happens. And if she does, then that's extra time that she can do something else. Maybe she can relax, whatever. The purpose of the planner is to just have an idea of what you can do effectively at a given time. It keeps you from sort of just wandering through your day, which is what a lot of people do. They wander, and this is why they don't get much done. This right here, this schedule that you're seeing, her planner, this prevents wandering because at any point in time, she has something that she could be doing. And even these gaps, these could just be free times. So even this is kind of like me countering the criticism I hear often. As you can see in her schedule, there are lots of white space. On Sunday alone, she has nothing planned. That's a complete day to do whatever she wants. And even after some of her classes, she still has plenty of gaps to kind of socialize, scroll through social media, take a nap, whatever she wants to do before she gets to studying and doing homework. And that's assuming she actually does homework and studies that day. There might be a chance that she doesn't have to study. There might be a chance that there's no project, no tests, no homework to do. And that's fine. That's more free time that she has. So I really want you to keep that in mind. This is just to provide a bit of structure and guidance to your day. It prevents you from just wandering and doing nothing. Because I tend to find that when people don't have any structure, when they don't have any set schedule lined up, they just do whatever comes to mind. And sometimes nothing comes to mind. Sometimes just watching TV all day is what comes to mind because it's a habit. And that's fine if you want to just watch TV. But if you want to be productive, then this allows you to be productive. Um, just a few more things to kind of keep in mind. She has time sectioned off to study and do homework, which is going to help prevent all of that cramming and that procrastination. When I did College Conqueror, and this is something I applied to my own life, I found that a lot of students, what they did is they tried to have a lot of fun during the week and they waited to the very last minute to begin studying. And that caused them so much stress. And it actually was more harm than good because I think when they would try to cram, they thought they would kind of retain it until the test, or at least they tried to. And they would try to just memorize everything before the test. I've found that it's not very efficient. It's very easy to forget everything and to stress yourself out and create that overwhelm. What I found that's effective is just studying a little bit. And I've kind of mentioned this already, but just studying a little bit every single day, or at least most days during the week. Just a little bit of studying here and there, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. And then by the time a test comes up, you don't have to sit there and study for hours or cram for hours. You kind of just by that point know what to expect on the test, and you kind of have the material already in your head. Hopefully, it's not memorized. Hopefully, you get the concept of whatever the test is going to be on. But let's just say, for the sake of this example, you have everything that you need to know fully memorized for the test. So you can go into the test at ease, breeze through it, and finish. And this was the case for me. I used to cram a lot in college. And then once I started switching things up and applying these strategies and these methods, I didn't get that overwhelm anymore. A test would come up. I wouldn't feel stressed about it. I already knew it was on the test. I would barely study. Like leading up to the test, I would barely study and I'd walk in, get a high grade, like a 90 something, and walk right out. Super easy test. And everyone else would be struggling, frantic, stressed out, panicking. I didn't have that towards the end of my college life because I would apply these strategies. So hopefully these things all help. And then one final thing too, I kind of mentioned this earlier when I talked about the flexibility, but if you take a look at her day, at 6 p.m., she's basically free. She's basically free until bedtime. And that's assuming she goes to bed at 10. She could go to bed at 11 if she wanted to. That's going to depend on her personal preference. But assuming she goes to bed at 10, she's got about 4 hours every single day, at least on the weekdays. She has more time than that on the weekends. But every single day on the weekdays, she can do whatever she wants. Whatever she wants. Anything. And this isn't like internship searching. This isn't working. This isn't like studying or doing homework. This is the fun stuff. She has 4 hours every single day on the weekdays to do the fun stuff. And she can visually see it. And she doesn't have to feel guilty about doing the fun stuff because she sorted out her planner. So I know I went on a rant about this planner, but I think this is one of the most critical tools to use. And in all these modules, you're going to see this exact same process where I take someone's problems and I break it down, figure out how we can sort out their day in the planner, and then use the planner as a guide to help them tackle their day and achieve their goals. This is one of the most crucial tools in my opinions, in my opinion. So, some key ideas for her to take away. She should be studying and putting her internship above any other goals she has besides some of the things that just come up like tests and projects, and maybe she has to do something for her club. This is different. In general, when it comes to her big goals, her internship and just general studying should come above basically everything else. And this is because her overall long-term goal of working for animators and company is contingent on her getting a good internship. So, high grades and high level experience, which will be achieved through the internship, is the most important thing for her to do. Also, as another side note, a tool that she can use, and I highly recommend everyone use this tool. When studying, Sarah should use the Pomodoro technique. Now, real quick, there are you're going to see in my other content more about things like the Pomodoro technique, but basically what it is, it's a kind of a system that you can use. It's a series of timers that's systemized to help you focus while you're working, while giving you enough time to mentally relax when you're not working. And so basically what it is, super fast, it's about, and this tends to vary, but it's about 35 to 45 minutes of just deep focused work. No distractions, no break, no phone calls, no texting, nothing. Put your phone in airplane mode. 35 to 45 minutes of deep work. Then you take about 5 to 10 minutes of just kind of relaxed time. This is the time where you can pull out your phone, go through social media, look at a funny cat video if you want to, whatever you want to do. Then you repeat the process about 3 to 4 times. And then after that third or fourth time of doing 35 to 45 minutes of deep work, then you relax for about 15 minutes. You allow your brain to sort of decompress and pull itself away from all of the work that you've been doing. Then, if you choose to, once that 15 minutes is up, you restart the cycle and you get back into that 35 to 45 minutes. You get back into that 35 to 45 minutes of deep work. So that's what I recommend she do. I tend to find that if you do that, it helps you get into a flow state more effectively. I'm not going to go super deep on the flow state right here, just because that might be another 10-minute explanation. But the gist of the flow state is basically it helps you focus more effectively. It kind of just puts you like almost in this trance state that helps you really get some quality work done. And then finally, to prevent late night scrolling and to prevent her going out late, something I recommend she try, and this is for if you're watching this is something you could try as well. Try grayscaling your phone and setting a specific time where your phone goes on do not disturb mode. I don't personally grayscale my phone because I don't use social media that much besides posting content, but I've had issues in the past where people call me late. Back when I did real estate actively as an active agent, people would call me super late, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., sometimes early, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And it, for me personally, some people handle this much better. It prevented me from really sleeping or working effectively. And the main reason is because, and this is at least true with real estate, usually people will call you when they have a problem with something or when they want something. And I think people tend to not understand that just because they want something doesn't mean that you're willing to help them with it at any given time. People might call at 5 a.m. because they saw a house and they want to see the house. Okay, cool. You don't need to call me at 5 a.m. to see the house. The house is not available to see at 5 a.m. in general. Or there's a situation with some email that they read at 11 p.m. and they want you to resolve it. Well, it's nothing I can do at 11 p.m. in general. So you don't need to call me this late. Let's wait until tomorrow and see if it resolves itself or see if I have a solution by that time tomorrow. And that's just an example. But in her situation, putting on do not disturb mode will prevent people from just kind of calling her at random throughout the night. And I say this because if she doesn't get the phone call or if she doesn't get the text until the next day, she's probably going to be less incentivized to go out. If she doesn't see the invitation, she can't respond to the invitation. It's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. And then the grayscale just prevents people from endless scrolling because all the visuals of social media and everything on your phone is far less appealing. So hopefully that all made sense. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. Final thoughts, and these are the final thoughts in every single module. In real life, problems always arise, and life is never simple enough to remain constant forever. As a time management and productivity coach, my goal is to help you work through those shifts in life that may deter you from your goals and productivity. And if you'd ever like to work with me, you can use the link in the program to sign up for a free 1 hour coaching session and then sign up for monthly coaching if you liked the 1 hour coaching session and if you need more help. You're not obligated, of course. There's going to be no pressure. I'm not going to try to like hard close you or anything like that. It is a paid program if you do it monthly, but I'm super happy to give a free 1 hour coaching session if you would like it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.